You're holding something that doesn't belong to you. It never did. And you don't even know it yet. Here's the thing about stealing. You think you know where it comes from. Desperation, right? Need, hunger, the starving person breaking into the bakery at midnight. That's the story everyone tells. That's the one that makes sense. But that's not how it started. The actual origin of stealing is one of the strangest reversals in all of human history. And by the end of this, you are going to look at every law, every prison, every locked door in your life, and understand exactly why they exist, and exactly when they became necessary. Let me take you back. Way back. You are somewhere in East Africa. It's roughly 70,000 years ago. You wake up before sunrise in a group of about 35 people. These are your people. You've known every single one of them your entire life. There is no one else for miles. You are hungry. Everyone is hungry. That is just the permanent condition of being alive right now. You go out. You find food. Maybe tubers pulled from the ground. Maybe berries. Maybe your group gets lucky and takes down something large, an antelope, or something even bigger. Now here's the thing. You bring that food back to camp. And here's what you do not do. You do not hide it. You do not lock it up. You do not put your name on it. You share it. Widely, with people who aren't your family. With people who contributed nothing to the hunt. With the old woman who can barely walk and the kid who spent all day doing nothing useful. You share it because that is how your world works, and here is the part that's going to mess with you. Nobody is stealing from you. Because stealing requires something that doesn't fully exist yet in your world. It requires the concept of mine. Think about that. Really sit with it for a second. Before you can steal something, someone has to own it. Before ownership, there is no theft, there's just taking. And taking in a group this small and this hungry is just called survival. Anthropologists have a name for what your ancient self is operating inside. They call it a sharing economy. Not the Airbnb kind. The real kind. The kind where an anthropologist named Nicholas Blurton Jones studied in 1984 and coined the term tolerated theft, the idea that when the cost of defending your food is higher than the cost of giving it away, you give it away. And in a group of 35 people where everyone is watching everyone all the time, it almost always costs more to hoard than to share. You store your meat in your neighbors, as one Kalahari Bushmen told a researcher decades later. That's not charity, that's accounting. So here is your situation. You were 70,000 years ago. You have no concept of private property the way you understand it now. You have no concept of theft. You have one rule that matters above everything else: stay in the group or die alone. And that rule is the most important thing in your life. Now I need to fast forward, because something changes. And when it changes everything. About 12,000 years ago, somewhere in a region we now call the Fertile Crescent, modern-day Syria, Iraq, Israel, Turkey, something happens that no human being on Earth has ever experienced before. You figure out how to grow food on purpose. Pause on that for a second. Not find food, not track food. Grow it, plant it, come back to it, control it. This seems like obviously good news. And in the short run, it is. You eat more reliably, your children survive at higher rates, your group stops moving. You build structures, you stay. But here's what you don't see coming. Here's the trap hidden inside the breakthrough. You now have a surplus. You have more food than your group can eat before it goes bad. And unlike the antelope that has to be shared immediately before it rots, grain can be stored. Grain can last months. Grain can sit in a clay vessel under your floor, and it will still be there tomorrow. and next week, and after winter. And when something can last, something can be owned. This is where it flips. If you have more grain right now than you could ever eat, and I also have grain, but maybe not as much, for the very first time in human history, there is something in your possession worth taking. You created property. And the moment you created property, you created theft. Here's the dark part. The part nobody in the farming revolution was progress story tells you. Those early agricultural communities, the ones in the Jordan Valley around 10,000 BC, the ones in Mesopotamia around 9,000 BC, they weren't suddenly happy and fed and secure. They were anxious, constantly, because for the first time in 200,000 years of human history, they had something to lose. You should feel this. Go back to you. It's 9,500 BC. You're standing in front of your grain storage. You built that storage with your own hands. You spent 3 months growing that grain. You dried it. You sealed it. You counted it. And now you're lying awake at night because your neighbor's grain storage is looking a little empty. That is new. That feeling. That specific dread. Your ancestors didn't have it. The hunter-gatherer version of you didn't have it. Because there was nothing to guard. And now? Now you have everything to guard. Here's the thing about that anxiety you're feeling at 9,500 BC. It's not irrational. It's not paranoia. The archaeologists can tell us that. At a site called Çatalhöyük in what is now central Turkey, a Neolithic settlement occupied between roughly 7,500 and 5,700 BC, researchers found something interesting in the skeletons. Skull fractures. Not from animals, from blunt objects, from other people. And the injuries increase as the settlement grows and the food stores grow with it. Conflict goes up with property, not before it. That's the data. And here is the comment I want you to drop below right now. Just put yes or no. Before watching this, did you think stealing came from desperation, not from abundance? Because most people do, and most people are wrong. Back to you. It's still 9,500 BCE, and you're lying awake next to your grain. You've got two options here. Option 1, you share your surplus. You do what your ancestors did. You keep distributing. You act like the old rules still apply. You treat your grain the same way the Hadza of Tanzania still treat a large animal kill, where researchers confirmed in a 2001 study that Hadza hunters give away roughly 58% of large game to households outside their own. You stay generous. You stay connected. You store your surplus in your neighbors. Option 2, you hold on to it. You start thinking of that grain as yours. You build a better storage container. You put a door on it. You start keeping track of who has more and who has less. Most early farmers picked option 2. Watch what that costs. Because the moment you pick option 2, your neighbor has to pick a side too. Do they trust the old system? Or do they start keeping track? And the moment two people in a community start keeping track, everyone has to. Because the one person not keeping track is the person who ends up with nothing. You have just created, from scratch, with your own hands and your own grain, the conditions for the first theft in human history. And here is the reversal. The thing that completely rewrites everything you've heard about this. Stealing did not come from desperation. Stealing did not come from poverty or need or hunger. Stealing came from abundance. Read that again. Abundance created theft. The surplus created the crime. Your prosperity created the problem. Before you had enough, there was nothing to take. The second you had more than enough, that exact moment, that specific threshold, you created a class of objects worth risking your life to take. And once something is worth risking your life to take, people will take it. Every prison in the world exists because 12,000 years ago, someone figured out how to grow wheat. That's not a metaphor. That's a causal chain you can trace. If that just reconfigured something in your head, and I think it did, hit like. It genuinely changes whether this channel reaches anyone else. The ancient world figured this out fast. The Code of Hammurabi, Babylonian king, roughly 1754 BCE, dedicates significant sections to theft. If you steal from a temple, you die. If you steal from another citizen, you pay back 10 times the value. 10 times. That is not a fine. That is a message. That is a society that has been badly hurt by theft and is terrified of it happening again. And here is the part that gets even stranger. Hammurabi's code was not the first. Before it came the Code of Ur-Nammu, written in Sumer around 2100 BC. Before that, clay tablets from around 3200 BC, the earliest written records humanity has, are inventory lists. Who has how much grain? Who owes what? They are not literature. They are not prayers. They are not stories. The very first thing human beings ever wrote down was property records, not art, not religion. Property, the moment writing was invented, the first thing your species did was write down who owns what. Because that was the most dangerous, urgent, constantly contested question of your new agricultural life. Now here's where your brain wants to do something predictable. It wants to separate you from this story. It wants to say, okay, ancient history, obviously theft is bad now, we've solved this. But here is what you're actually still living inside, 12,000 years later. The endowment effect. You've probably never heard it called that. But you live it every day. Psychologists Richard Thaler and Daniel Kahneman studied it. The finding is brutal in its simplicity. The moment something belongs to you, you value it higher than it actually is. You'd pay more to keep something you already own than you'd pay to acquire the exact same thing. Not a little more. About twice as much. You're not being rational. You're being 70,000-year-old human. Your brain treats losing something you own as a threat to survival, because for most of human history, that's exactly what it was. This is not a quirk. This is not a bias to overcome. This is the same circuitry that made your ancestor guard that clay vessel of grain with their life. You carry it everywhere. You feel it when someone takes your parking spot, when a coworker gets credit for your idea, when a deal you were close to falls through. That isn't modern frustration. That is Neolithic loss aversion in a business casual setting. And here's what makes this whole thing really strange. The Jew hoansi people of Namibia, a hunter-gatherer group studied extensively by anthropologist James Suzman over 20-plus years of fieldwork, they operate almost entirely outside this system. They practice something called demand sharing. If you want something someone else has, you ask for it. And they give it to you, not because they're unusually generous, because in their framework, refusing to share is the antisocial act. You asking is normal. Them hoarding is the problem. The Jew hoansi do not have a word with the same weight as mine in their language, not the way you use it, and they almost never experience what you'd call theft. Think about that. There's a whole group of human beings alive right now in the 21st century who barely experience theft because they never made the cognitive and cultural leap that turned surplus into property. They kept storing their meat in their neighbors. And here is the subscribe moment, because this is where it gets genuinely strange next. There is an entire side of this story I haven't touched yet. What happened after 3000 BC when the first cities formed and one group figured out a much more efficient strategy than stealing from neighbors? Why steal a jar of grain when you can just become the person everyone has to give grain to? There's a whole script coming on that. Subscribe, because you don't want to be halfway through a conversation without the second half. So where does this leave you? Here's your real fork. The one sitting in your actual life, not 9500 BCE. You've spent your whole adult life building up things that are yours. Your account, your apartment, your reputation, your stake in something. That makes sense. You live in an agricultural civilization. Property is the operating system here. But you also carry the cost. The lock on the door, the anxiety when markets dip, the specific feeling when someone takes something from your plate and it does not matter how small the plate is. Your ancient self, the one walking the savannah in a group of 35, had none of that weight. They were poor by every modern measurement. They owned almost nothing. And they were, depending on who you ask, possibly more consistently content than the farmers who replaced them. Archaeologists note that the skeletons of early farmers are shorter, with more evidence of disease and nutritional deficiency than the hunter-gatherers who preceded them right up until about 5000 BCE. The farmers had more food. They also had less health, more conflict, and for the very first time, the experience of being robbed. The abundance trap is real. More to own means more to lose. More to lose means more to guard. More to guard means more to fight over. And the person who had nothing to steal from you was the one sleeping better at night. One question I want to leave sitting in the room. When was the last time you spent real energy protecting something that wasn't actually making you happy? Just guarding it. Not using it, not enjoying it, just making sure no one took it. Tell me that story below. Because I think more of you have one than you'd expect,